Wait, this isn't a dog? Just a few hours ago, my estranged sister-in-law had suddenly messaged me, ordering me to take care of her dog while she was on vacation. I hadn't spoken to her in years, yet she had the audacity to demand this without even asking. Then I learned something even worse. The dog had already been left alone for 3 days. Panic surged through me. I couldn't just ignore it. I rushed over to her apartment. But nothing could have prepared me for what I found inside. The moment I unlocked the door, an overpowering stench hit me like a punch to the gut. Rotting food. Unwashed laundry. Something worse. I instinctively covered my nose as I stepped inside. The room was an absolute disaster, piles of trash everywhere, dirty dishes stacked in the sink, and junk cluttering every inch of the floor. It looked like a place no human, let alone an animal, should live in. I forced myself forward, weaving through the filthy maze, calling out for the dog. "It's okay, buddy. Come out." No response. I called again, stepping further in, past the collapsing piles of garbage. And then I saw something in the shadows. But it wasn't a dog. It was a child. A little girl, skinny, dressed in tattered clothes, crouched on the filthy floor, eating crumbs and leftovers like a stray animal. I froze. For a moment, my brain refused to process what I was looking at. Then, a sickening realization settled in. This wasn't just neglect. This was abuse. My name is Kyla, I'm 32 years old, and I've been married for 7 years. I don't have children, which has strained my relationship with my in-laws. They've made their disapproval very clear over the years, treating me like I'm somehow less because of it. Eventually, I cut ties with them. Since then, my husband Dalton and I have lived peacefully, just the two of us and our dog, Charlie. That peace was shattered the day I got that message. It came from an unknown number. "Hey, it's been a while. I'm traveling abroad for a bit, so take care of my dog. I left the key in the mailbox. Thanks." I stared at my screen. What? At first, I thought it was a prank. But then, I recognized the number. It belonged to Erin, my sister-in-law, who I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. We weren't on good terms, so her suddenly contacting me and ordering me to take care of her dog was beyond baffling. As I hesitated, another message arrived. "I've been gone since the day before yesterday, so hurry up." A cold chill ran down my spine. Since the day before yesterday? That meant the dog had been alone for 3 days. I felt a rising sense of urgency. If no one had been feeding it or giving it water, it could be in serious danger. I grabbed my car keys and rushed to her address. At the time, I had no idea what kind of nightmare I was about to walk into. Her apartment was in a rundown building, and the lack of a nameplate made it look even more uninviting. I checked the mailbox. Just as she had said, there was a key inside. For a moment, I hesitated. Even though I had her permission, entering someone else's home felt wrong. Then I heard it. A faint rustling sound from inside. The dog. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. And that's when the smell hit me. Rotten. Sour. Filthy. I gagged, covering my mouth and nose with my sleeve. The entire room was a disaster zone. Trash bags piled high, food rotting in containers, dishes stacked with mold, clothes strewn everywhere. It was disgusting. And somewhere in all this filth, a dog was trapped. I had to find it. I pushed through the garbage piles, my shoes crunching against old wrappers and broken junk. My stomach churned. I couldn't even see the kitchen through the mess, and the curtains were drawn, making the air stuffy and suffocating. Then I heard the sound again. I turned toward the back of the apartment. But instead of a dog, I found her. A little girl, huddled in the darkness, eating scraps off the floor. I stared in shock. "Who are you? Why are you here?" The child, a young girl with long, unkempt hair, didn't even look up. She just kept eating, shoving whatever she could find into her small hands. My heart clenched. How long had she been living like this? I took a step forward, but she flinched, suddenly realizing I was there. her eyes wide with fear. I immediately lowered my voice, trying not to scare her. Hey, sweetie, my name is Kyla. What's yours? A moment of hesitation then. Sage. Her name was Sage. I swallowed back the lump in my throat. Are you hungry? Another pause. Then, slowly, she nodded. I forced a smile, trying to mask my horror. Why don't you come with me? I'll get you something to eat. But then she shook her head, clutching her tiny fists. I can't leave. If I do, Mommy will get mad at me. I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to cry, but I held it in. This was Aaron's daughter, my niece. And she had been living like this, starving, abandoned, forgotten. I had no doubt now, I couldn't leave her here. It's okay, I whispered. I'm your mom's sister. I'll talk to her, okay? Sage hesitated, but finally, slowly, she stood up. She was so thin, I could see her ribs through the fabric of her dirty clothes. When I picked her up, I was shocked by how light she was. She hadn't bathed in ages. Her small body reeked of neglect. I hugged her tightly, feeling a mix of rage and heartbreak swell inside me. How could Erin do this? How could she leave her own child to starve? One thing was clear. I wasn't leaving Sage behind. Sage didn't say much as she soaked in the warm bath, but I could see her tiny shoulders relax just a little. Here, sweetheart. These are your new pajamas. She took them hesitantly, staring at the soft fabric for a long moment. Can I really wear these? She asked in a small voice. Of course, I reassured her. I bought them just for you. For a second, she just stood there, clutching the pajamas in her little hands. Then, without warning, tears spilled down her cheeks. Sage? What's wrong? Does something hurt? Panic shot through me. I instinctively stepped forward, but Sage quickly shook her head. She wasn't hurt. She was crying from happiness. It's my first time ever having pajamas of my own, she whispered, her voice trembling. It feels like a dream. My chest tightened painfully. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I pulled her into my arms, hugging her as my own tears fell. That night, Sage continued to find joy in the simplest things. At dinner, she whispered, "The rice is warm and so delicious." At bedtime, she gasped, "This bed feels like a cloud." Each time, my heart ached a little more. And each time, my anger toward Erin burned hotter. Dalton and I tried countless times to get in touch with Erin. Nothing. Her phone was disconnected. Emails ignored. When we called my in-laws, their response was always the same. She's your problem now. Figure it out yourself. Eventually, they stopped answering altogether. Weeks passed. Then months. Sage, however, was flourishing. She had settled into our home, and Charlie, our dog, had completely bonded with her. The two of them were inseparable, playing together for hours. Watching them, I realized something. I wanted to raise Sage as my own. But without legal documents and without Erin's consent, adoption was impossible. One night, I finally told Dalton how I felt. I want to make Sage our daughter. But unless we can get Erin's parental rights revoked, we can't adopt her. Dalton nodded. I know. But until we can, she'll still be our family. No matter what. When we told Sage about our decision, she hesitated for a moment before looking up at us with wide, hopeful eyes. Can I call you Mom and Dad? My throat tightened, and tears welled up in my eyes. Dalton and I hugged her tightly, barely able to speak. That was the moment Sage truly became our daughter. Before I knew it, a year had passed. Erin never showed up. She had vanished completely, and Sage and I had become a real family. But then, one day, everything changed. The doorbell rang unexpectedly that morning. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, my stomach dropped. Erin. She stood there, smirking, her arms crossed. Hey, Kyla. It's been a while. I froze, stunned by her audacity. What do you want? I asked, my voice cold. Sage. I'm taking her back today. I nearly laughed. After disappearing for a year, she just shows up and demands her child back? Excuse me? I glared at her. You abandoned her, Erin. You left her in a disgusting apartment, starving, eating food off the floor. And now, after a year, you suddenly think you can waltz back in and take her? She snorted, completely unfazed. You're acting like you're her real mother. You were just babysitting for a while. Get over yourself. Get out. I snapped. A neighbor walking by turned to glance at us, sensing the tension. Erin must have noticed too, because she smirked, backing away. Fine. I'll be back. And when I come, you'd better have her things packed. With that, she turned and walked off, leaving me shaking with rage. Dalton rushed home the moment I told him. We knew this moment might come, so we had already prepared our next move. We're not letting her take Sage, Dalton said firmly. I nodded. Whatever it takes, we'll protect her. A week later, we called Erin over, making her think we had given up. She walked in, grinning triumphantly. Finally came to your senses, huh? She sneered. Where's my daughter? At kindergarten, I said calmly. We wanted to talk first. Erin flopped onto the couch, grabbing one of the tea cookies I had set out, completely at ease. I let her enjoy her false confidence for a moment before sliding an envelope across the table. Here. Take a look. Her smirk faded as she pulled out the papers inside. Her face paled as she read. It was a full investigative report on her crimes. We had tracked her down, and what we found was far worse than we imagined. Marriage fraud. She had been scamming men, mostly divorced or single fathers, manipulating their emotions, and then stealing their money. This is fake, Erin shrieked, clutching the papers. Don't play dumb, I said coldly. You targeted men who were vulnerable and used Sage as a prop to gain their trust. Erin's face twisted with rage. You old hag! Give her back! She screamed, lunging at me. I barely had time to react before she grabbed me by the shirt, yanking me forward. Charlie snapped. He lunged between us, growling viciously. Erin stumbled back, eyes wide with fear. Then, she recovered, and kicked him. Hard. Pain shot through my side as I threw myself in front of Charlie, taking the full impact of the second kick. I gasped, barely able to breathe. You! Before she could attack again, a firm voice rang out. That's enough. Erin whirled around, and froze. Standing in the doorway was Dalton, and Officer Russo. Erin Holmes, you're under arrest. Erin's eyes went wide. What? I didn't do anything, she shrieked. You assaulted Kyla. And, Russo added, you have a long list of fraud charges to answer for. Erin thrashed, screaming at the officers. As they dragged her out, she locked eyes with me. This isn't over, she spat. You stole my daughter. I stood tall, despite the pain in my ribs. No, Erin. I protected her. Erin was sentenced to prison for fraud. With her criminal record exposed, her parental rights were revoked. And finally, Dalton and I were able to adopt Sage. Mom! Let's take Charlie for a walk. Sage's bright, happy voice rang out as she smiled up at me. I held her hand, watching as Charlie wagged his tail. She was safe now. And from now on, she would always be loved.